good, because I'm going to take a different approach than we today. I'm going to start as the high point of what we're looking for. So as we're settling back down, I'm here to tell you a little bit about the movement of people using business as a force for good. And I'm going to start with why I'm going to tell you about that. So I'm going to use a microphone. Then not, is this better? Because I think it's really important to earn in these points earlier that most of what we talk about as far as business practices and business case for sustainability and all the kinds of things that we're going to go into today are mostly a means to an end. And we don't talk a ton about the end. And so to give you a sense of what B-Lab is focused on, we have a pretty big vision, which is why we need a lot of help from everyone in this room, around leading a global movement of people using business as a force for good, so that one day all companies, not just B Corps, not just the folks on that list you saw right there, are competing not to be the best in the world, but the best for the world. And the end game is a shared and durable prosperity. Because right now, there's a lot of prosperity that's very concentrated. There's a lot of work being done on the environmental piece, but we're not sure it's durable yet. And we need to make sure that we actually have an environment and a planet we can hand on to future generations. And so what this means for us, what the goal for us is around prosperity in which there is equality of opportunity, a healthy environment, strong communities, and work with dignity and purpose for all. So that's a big goal. And the approach that we take is really around what Erin was saying before, around harnessing the power of business to reach that goal. Because we know there's a lot of work being done in the governmental sections and the non-profit sectors around addressing poverty, around creating supportive public policy, but it's not enough. And what we've seen, what Paul Hawken, what Interface, what folks across the country and around the world have seen is that we really need to leverage the power of business to create lasting change. And the good news is this movement has already started. There are folks from conscious consumers, of which there are 60 million here in the United States. There's already movements of socially responsible investing. There is 100,000 plus social entrepreneurs and sustainable businesses across the country that are working on these issues. And it's really spreading. What we know that the sustainability is good for business. And the good news is, you don't have to believe me on that. And you shouldn't believe me on that, because I work for B-Lab, and I'm dedicated to this mission. And if you were expecting me to be able to convince you of that, then you're barking up the wrong tree, because all you're going to say at the end of that is like, okay, mission-driven girl from Pennsylvania, where's the numbers? And so I will direct you to pretty much everyone and their brother, from Goldman Sachs to PricewaterhouseCoopers to Deloitte to Harvard Business Review to Cohen to Edelman. Everybody's out there really seeing that companies who are engaging their employees, companies who are addressing environmental issues, companies who enable employees to bring their whole selves to work, outperform, right, on 1,000 different financial metrics, over short term, over long term. So I encourage you, we can totally talk about this, and I will dig deep if you want to, but I will tell you right now it is less convincing coming from me than coming from your peers at other research institutions and folks whose job it is to actually study this, because they'll have the methods and the processes and all that deep research in there. And the end goal here is that we know this works. And we know there's really great examples from bakeries to home health care providers, to manufacturers, to online retailers, to banks, to law firms, to brewing companies, just like we heard earlier today. And so this already started, right? There's thousands of examples that y'all can think of companies that inspire you. But we're not there yet. right? And the main reason that we know we're not there yet is that we're having this day, right? And the main reason that we know we're not there yet is because all those companies and all those practices are seen as the exception, right? You can think about all of those because you remember them, because they're memorable, right? The fact that Interface is doing all this, that's different, that's exciting, it's innovative. And it's not seen as the norm. It's not seen as, well, of course we use gravity and not glue, right? Like, hello. And so there's still some way to go here. And as Jim and Lisa has talked a little bit about, there's also some public policy and structural impediments, right? And so when we talk about benefit corp in a little bit, the idea that there could be a corporate structure in which companies think about more than just money is crazy, right? It's only 5 years old. And so that's, the exciting piece is that this movement is starting and it's growing, but we know that we have a long way to go. And I really like the way that Lee was talking about it earlier today around kind of the systemic change of what we have to do. Because we really think about that in an idea of changing norms and building institutions, right? So this isn't just about company behavior. It's also about corporate structure. It's also about consumers making informed decisions about the products they buy. It's about employees making informed decisions about where they work. It's about changing the way that we teach business education. It's about changing the way the media talks about these stories and making sure that we're really highlighting leaders. So B-Lab is often thought of like either the policy think tank or the certifier of B corporations. But what we look at and what we really try and do is to see how do we make systems change work and how do we engage all of those different pieces of the puzzle to really get to a step function change in how business is expected to run and how people expect to interact with the economy. And just because we really love metaphors, and there'll be a lot of those throughout the day, one of our favorite ones is the mountain, which I think is particularly relevant in this beautiful arena. Now we see that there's really two critical paths around engaging businesses to step up to competing to be best for the world. And that's first around measuring what matters, right? That's around actually evaluating your business practices, improving your business practices, getting people to figure out new and innovative ways to change your old manufacturing process or your old HR processes. And it's also around mission alignment, that we face a lot of structural challenges on how companies are expected to behave, whether it's from fiduciary duty of the board of directors, or whether it's from ERISA guidelines on what pension funds are allowed to look at when they're making investment decisions. There's a lot of work to be done in the policy side of making sure that we're actually aligning the structure of what we do with the values of what we do. And just as a quick side note on this, I have been with B-Lab for 8 years now since our launch, and so if you want to hear all the stories and where the bodies are buried, I'm happy to go into some of those tales. But we have a really strong team domestically. This is a 50-person team now based in Philadelphia with expertise in operations, in capital, in entrepreneurship, folks who founded outdoor apparel companies, basketball shoe companies, who've run MSD Capital and worked at Credit Suisse, and with a lot of great perspective on how to build this movement. And importantly, this isn't just something that's happening in Philadelphia, where we're based, or in the US, where we started, but which is now a global movement, which is actually really exciting. And if nothing else, I hope you remember this part. Most folks have come to us, right? We didn't go out and pitch anybody, because we thought we weren't ready yet. We figured we would try and get our own feet under the ground and then figure out how to expand. And what we found is that people hear about this movement and they want to be part of it and they want to bring it to their communities. And so we now have almost 100 folks working on this movement across the world to bring the movement of people using business as a force for good and make it really a global movement. So that's kind of the big vision of where we're going. But the kind of how we do it looks like this. Everything that we do is based on the impact assessment, which I'm going to delve a little bit into because I know there's lots of academics in the room who want to get into the nuts and bolts. But that's really about how we encourage and enable companies to measure what matters. And then I'll talk a little bit about our other initiatives around removing legal impediments for companies to maintain mission as they scale, around facilitating a really robust capital markets system so that companies who want to scale and create that mission have access to investors who are supportive of that and who are not upset about mission creep, but are actually encouraging folks to stay aligned on their mission. And then, of course, around the leaders of this community of certified B corporations. And Jim asked me to talk a little bit around specific practices that this community is embedding. And so we'll go into a couple of the leaders of that community and exactly what it is that they're doing that's making change in their communities. So first and foremost, the biggest kind of piece that we work on is the B impact assessment. And when you think about the assessment, what this is, it's a corollary to your financials, right? Every business person has their P&L and their financial statements, and they have really great tools available to them to tell them how they're doing from a financial perspective. And I'm sure there are folks in this room who do indeed give courses every year about what those tools are, how to use them, how to customize them for your industry, for your business, for your stage of life as a company. But what hasn't been out there is a similar tool to measure the impact that you have on your community, your employees, and your environment. And so what we have built and what is the core of everything that we do is the B impact assessment, which is a comprehensive, holistic look at what your company is doing. And so it's transparent. You can see exactly how we weight everything. You can go look at all the questions. It's dynamic. It will change based on your size and sector. So we would ask different questions of interface than we would of loss province. And it's community-based. Very importantly, B-Lab will never have all the answers on how to measure impact, on how to implement all of the practices that we've seen. And so we really make sure to ask practitioners and thought leaders and academics, folks across all different industries on how we can be measuring impact better and what the best practices are that are out there. And so we rely significantly on stakeholder engagement to improve that tool over time. Just to give you a little sense of what it looks like, there are 72 versions now, changing based on size, sector, and market. So different versions for folks in the US versus folks in Kenya, with a couple of specific industry addenda. And it goes pretty deep. And so the challenge and opportunity, as I always tell folks, is we ask everything. And that can be kind of a pain in the ass, and people sometimes don't appreciate that because they say, hey Heather, we've crushed every single environmental piece. And we did pretty good on the worker stuff too. Like, can't we call it a day? We're doing really well and there's really good stuff, and we say that's awesome. A, we need to make sure that we value all different kinds of impact that companies create. And B, even if you're crushing on other sectors, I want you to think about what those other impacts are, right? Maybe that environmental section was your first step because it was the low-hanging fruit and you could get everybody's head wrapped around managing waste. But then you need to take that next step, and oftentimes that next step is unclear. And so the B impact assessment gives you a framework of looking at all the different kinds of impact that you have and what the best practices are, and then you choose, right? This is a choose your own adventure system. If you say, I really want to focus on my strengths and make sure we're crushing on workers first and then get to all this, that's great. But if you want to know, looking at a 20-year vision, where you want to be at that moment, you can use the impact assessment to kind of have that holistic look of what your company can be doing. And so we also have created, as part of that assessment, a scorecard. So this is, you get this as you go through the assessment. You can see how your score is changing. And then you can see how you're doing compared to the community of certified B corporations, and then to other folks who have taken the assessment to get a snapshot of what you're doing. And so really, on the one hand, this is super exciting and innovative, and it's the only tool like out there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, like all this stuff exists on the financial side of things, and this is really a first step on people care about the impact that they have on things besides the bottom line, so they need a tool to be able to measure that. Actually, I'm not one of those folks who does the Fitbit challenges, but does anybody in this room either participate in or know someone who has a Fitbit? Yes, there you go. and so really what we look at this as is a little bit of a Fitbit for impact, right? Because everybody who raised their hand knows someone who got a Fitbit, and they knew that walking was good for them, but all of a sudden they're just taking some extra steps. Just because Sarah down the street or from book club, has that beat by 500 steps, and damn if Sarah's going to win the competition. And so what we're trying to do fundamentally is create a system, an easy, comparable system that enables companies to measure their impact, see how they're doing, and figure out how to improve. Essentially just level the playing field. We've got all these kinds of tools in the financial world, and we need them for the impact world because people do care about the impact that they have with their business. I'm going to pause right there because that's probably the most important piece of everything. Questions? Yeah?
Do you have universities that you evaluate on these metrics?
Great question. So we'll get into, so we only certify as B corporations for-profit companies. Exactly. So we'll get a little bit into kind of how folks in this room can be involved in this movement. We have seen universities and nonprofits and government agencies, all kinds of folks, use the assessment as a management tool, right? So even if you're not going down a path of certification, this tool is available for the university as a whole, for individual divisions, and people use that as a management tool in order to kind of see where they are. And so the tool can be used by anyone, even if kind of the next step isn't necessarily relevant to all folks.
What's your business model? How do you fund your growth?
Yeah, okay. So we're a nonprofit. We are about 70-30 right now with philanthropic funding and fees from certification and for access to our investor-facing tool.
70 philanthropy?
Yeah. And so the goal is to get to a more self-sustaining level. That would be lovely. On the other hand, we do want to make sure that all of the tools that we develop are available for free. So we don't charge for the assessment, we don't charge for any of the policy work that we do, which some folks think is not useful. But it's really important to us that all companies be able to take advantage of these tools. Great. Oh.
How did you choose the name? What does it stand for?
So originally, when we were talking about kind of like a new type of company and the certification of B corporations, which we'll talk a little bit about, we figured there's a C corp, there's an S corp, gotta have another letter, and so we went to the alphabet, and B seemed pretty good, and it creates, most of the time it says with benefit, it's creating benefits for communities, employees, and environment. So just kind of giving you a little bit more of insight into our work. So that's the basis of everything that we do, right? Step one, being able to measure. Step two, be able to actually legally be allowed to do it, right? Which some folks might actually argue is step one. So does anybody in this room teach corporate structures or any kind of like legal stuff? Yeah. Couple folks. So this can get either like really boring or really sexy real quick. So you can choose which way you want to react to that. But a main issue that has been facing mission-driven companies for a long time, especially in the U.S., but in a lot of other jurisdictions as well, is that there's law and custom and precedents coming from very powerful courts that say that the responsibility of a business, the responsibility of a board, is to maximize shareholder value. And if you want to do something that does not do that, you are breaking a law, and your shareholder can sue you for breach of fiduciary duties. And most of the time, you can kind of sweep that under the rug because there's this thing called the business judgment rule, which protects directors from kind of operational decisions and all kind of good stuff like that. And so it doesn't get in the way too much on a day-to-day practices kind of environment. But what it does do is it creates issues at sale, right? What this means is that you have to sell to the highest bidder, regardless of who that highest bidder is. And then kind of backing up from that, it creates issues at investment, right? If you know that you have an investor who's looking for a particular kind of return at a particular flip time, and you know that you have to sell to the highest bidder, all of a sudden, maybe you're not looking for money anymore, right? All of a sudden, maybe you want to make sure that investors in your company are not going to be able to force a sale to someone who you don't think will do a good job of maintaining the mission and vision of the company. And all of a sudden, a company who might be able to scale their impact and have immense impact on their communities and workers is growing a little bit more slowly, or a lot more slowly, because there's this specter out there of having to provide that return and not having a lot of choices at sale. And finally, it's a problem because everybody is not immoral. And even if you are a founder of a company and you've been able to maintain your mission and you've been able to grow and scale and everything's beautiful and wonderful and lovely, you wrinkle and then you figure out what's going to happen next. And there's not a lot of really great options for succession for mission-driven companies. And a lot of that pressure, a lot of the reason why there aren't those options is because of this environment where we expect business to be solely focused on financial return. And so one of the things that B-Lab does is try and figure out solutions to that problem. In some contexts, they're pretty easy. LLCs, as most of you might know, are contract organizations. We figured out language for them, right? You change a little bit of the contract agreement, everyone signs off, all of a sudden you're allowed to consider stakeholders, and everybody's happy. In corporations, it's not as easy because corporations, by definition, have to follow corporate law. It's total pain. And so we actually had to pass legislation to change this fact. And so what we've done is created the benefit corporation structure, which is now passed in over 30 states across the country, that changes the purpose, accountability, and transparency of a company and moves it from being solely focused on considering shareholders and moves it to a requirement that the company consider all of its stakeholders. That's its community, its environment, its workers, its suppliers, and its customers. Very importantly, for the finance folks in the room, it does not affect your tax status. All governance is at the state level, so this is all at the state level. It doesn't affect any kind of federal tax designation. And it's really exciting. The first benefit corporation legislation passed in 2010. We've now passed in over 30 states in 5 years with Democratic and Republican co-sponsors, sponsors, governors, challenges, task forces, all that, because this isn't coming from someone telling companies they should do it this way. This is in response to companies in each of these states going and testifying, I need this protection, I need this structure, because I want to do better by my employees. I want to do better by the community that I serve in your state, and you are getting in the way. And so we've been able to have pretty amazing progress in passing legislation across the country. And increasingly around the globe, the benefit corporation structure is now in process, a similar structure in Chile, and also in the UK as part of the KICS kind of family of structures. So that is where we are in making sure that all companies can maintain mission as they scale. And so the real quick cheat sheet, because B Corp and Benefit Corp sound real similar. B Corp is a certification, and we'll go through certification requirements. You must go through B-Lab in order to be certified. That is all through our system. A benefit corporation is a structure, right? It sits at the Secretary of State's office as like a checkbox on their paperwork, and so you never have to talk to B-Lab. You don't have to, like me or Jay or Bart or Andrew or anybody who works there. You can just say like, hey, that's a really useful thing. I'm going to go elect that as I'm incorporating that, or I'm going to elect to change my structure into a benefit corporation to ensure that I'm really embedding the values of my company into its corporate DNA. That's can be a little weird. Anybody want to pause there? All right, you guys are real smart. Let's figure this out. And then the other kind of piece of the puzzle before we get to the companies and the really exciting business practices is around providing a really great way for investors and companies to connect around impact. And so we've developed B Analytics, which is a way for investors to have their portfolio companies measure their impact in a way that is aggregatable and comparable across industry and size. Companies can get rated on the B Analytics platform using that same B impact assessment. They're then listed in this platform, and investors can use that platform to find companies who match their impact focus. And it's really useful not only just for investors, right, which is how we originally designed the system, is that this was designed to make it easier to enter into the impact investing space by having one pool of investment metrics. But now it's actually being used by, and there's some really big name investment folks who are starting to use this either as a requirement for every company that they invest in, or as a preference, right? That they have a preference for companies who have gone through this rating process. And beyond that, we've now been able to expand that measurement platform to enable folks on the supply chain, from government, and from business associations to use this platform to encourage their suppliers, their companies, or their members to measure their impact and aggregate that data so they can report back and actually provide resources on improvement. So that is kind of our, and you'll hear a little bit more from John Fullerton around some of the energy and the impact investing space. Again, our goal is really to facilitate that by providing the impact metrics and kind of analysis system so everybody has a shared language and a shared platform around that process. And finally, we're going to get to the good stuff. Like Heather, we came talking to you because you work with certified B corporations and they're really awesome, so could you please get to that right now? So first of all, what is a certified B corporation? So think of it as the same similar idea as fair trade to coffee or organic to milk. It is a certification for companies that are using their business as a force for good. And there's 3 steps of this. They meet verified higher levels of social and environmental performance. So they're going through that B impact assessment. They're earning a score of 80 or more, and they're going through a verification process with B-Lab. They then have to post those results publicly on bcorporation.net, which can actually be kind of scary, especially for high performers who already have their customers' trust. Because all of a sudden the customers can see not just all the sexy cool things they do, but also the weak spots, and accountability. So they're becoming a benefit corporation, they're putting language into their operating agreement to say that they'll consider not just the financial return to their shareholders, but also consider the impact of their decision on their stakeholders. And it's growing. This is already outdated, we now have over 1,300 B corporations in a variety of countries across the globe. The world is noticing. We've been able to garner press from Entrepreneur to The Guardian to the New York Times, and if you guys don't recognize him, that's David Brooks. He's a traditionally conservative columnist who's really excited about the B Corporation movement. Not the typical guy who you might think of as really supporting this movement, but he's really seeing this as a way to marry the flexibility of the business world with the mission of the nonprofit world. And we've traditionally been a community of small and medium-sized enterprises, but as this movement has been growing, B Corps are entering into the public market in a variety of ways. So we now have Natura, which is a Brazilian-based cosmetics company, which is our first public company. We also have Etsy, who just went public a few months ago, had an amazing IPO, which we're really excited about. And a bunch of folks who are subsidiaries of large public folks. So you have the Ben & Jerry's with Unilever, but also Plum Organics with Campbell, Happy Family with Danone, and New Chapter with P&G. And so there's growing traction amongst larger enterprises around using the assessment for their supply chain, and working with B corporations to really access different markets and learn from the impact that they have with their customers. Yeah.
Have you seen any correlation whatsoever between the assessment scores going up and profitability going up?
So that's a hard question to answer, mostly because we don't do a lot of research on our own data, because this takes a lot of time. There are folks who are looking at that, and there are, we have partnered with the folks at Duke Fuqua on doing some RFPs for the, looking at the data. It's early on, and we have a lot of data challenges because this is, again, mostly small and medium enterprises and private companies. We don't have access to a lot of the financial information that would automatically be available for larger company studies. We do have a ton of anecdotal evidence of B corporations crush. They're less likely to go out of business during the recession. They're more likely to retain employees. They were more likely to grow over the past 5 years than the regular small and medium-sized enterprise. So there are positive correlations with being a B corporation. There's not a ton of data yet on, does it matter if you're an 80 versus a 102. And just to give you a little bit more insight into the process, because I know a lot of folks might be interested in that detail. The first step is, I'm just noticing that like all the fonts are kind of weird, so sorry about that. The dangers of using someone else's computer. So they have to earn an 80 bar on the B impact assessment. Those points can come from anywhere. Right, so maybe you get 20 points in workers and then 30 points in environment, and et cetera. It builds out to an 80. It's impossible to pass the assessment with points from only one section. So we've built it so that this is really a holistic look at a company. You can't just be doing one thing and still pass the assessment. This is a deliberately high bar for companies who are thinking about this in a holistic way. They're putting the language, either from the benefit corporation structure or from the language developed for LLCs, into the actual corporate structure of their company. So that is a requirement for certified B corporations. And they have to go through a pretty intensive verification process with us. So there's a phone review and a document review with our staff. There's then a 10% on-site review of all certified B corporations, plus a required on-site review of every company who's a subsidiary during every term, right? So because you're a subsidiary, the legal might not mean as much, and so we actually come and do an on-site review of your operations every 2 years. And so what are these companies doing? They're doing amazing things in their community, and I'll start with one who's kind of the standard gold star. Has anybody ever eaten any kind of Ben & Jerry's flavor that had brownies in it? Yes, some of the ladies in the room, okay. Grayson Bakery makes all their brownies. They're delicious. Very importantly, they get no credit for the brownies because like solving my heartache is not solving a social or environmental problem. But they have a really focused program on providing employment opportunities with folks who have barriers to employment. So that means they have folks who have health problems with long-term housing, who have incarceration backgrounds, who have addiction backgrounds, and they have a first come, first serve policy. You show up at the door when they have an opening, you get put in the list, you get called. Regardless of what happens, they are giving everybody a second chance, and they have a ton of infrastructure in place to create apprenticeship systems so folks can learn, and so they can access a variety of services to help them in other parts of their life. and really enabling them to then move on from a manufacturing job into a more long-term position. Their goal is not actually to have those folks long-term. Their goal is to create the bridge from a place where they can't get opportunity to a place where they're really able to find employment anywhere. Grayson's the most well-known of those folks, but these are all over. Rhino makes the cookie dough for Ben & Jerry's. They have a similar program up in the Northeast. Rubicon Bakery makes the cakes that you find at Whole Foods, cookies, all kinds of things. Similar program, there's a picture right there of a woman who's in the Jails to Jobs program and really creating a path for herself out of a really dark place into a place where she's proud of the company that she works for. Susty Party makes sustainable party supplies, right? It's just like, that's like more fun. And they've actually developed manufacturing systems so that they can employ folks with vision issues, right? Which is another kind of category of folks who often have trouble getting entry-level work. And importantly, those are folks who, like, that's like their thing, right? And so that you're like, okay, well, that's their thing, they spend a lot of time on it, like, fine. There are other folks who are doing this where it's not the central operating principle of the company, but they have a commitment to their communities, and so they are working in their community to create those pathways to employment. And so Cascade Engineering is one that you might not have thought of, either as a potential certified B Corporation, right? Because they make plastics, they're a plastics manufacturer in the Midwest. But they have a really robust welfare to work program in which they're really making sure that the positions at their manufacturing plant are available to folks who need them. And a lot of those workers have been kind of like high bar worker stuff. There's a ton of work being out there just creating a great place to work, right? So Badger Balm makes hand products and personal products. They're an amazing place to work. I really recommend you going to see them if you're ever in Gilson, New Hampshire. They will cook you a homemade meal for lunch every single day for all of their employees. They have a family-friendly workplace. They have an amazing program for community service in their communities. They have flexible work office hours. They're just creating a really great place to work. Again, their product isn't necessarily doing a ton, right? It's lotion. And so a lot of these companies, like, if you often think of the typical folks in this community as someone whose product is doing something, this is all the way through. And another example of that is a King Arthur flower, which is a really great example of someone who's committed to their employees. It's a 100% employee-owned company. That creates a lot of incentive to create a great place to work because the folks who own it are running it. But they're also use that as a leverage point to create great impact in their communities. So they have a really cool student baking program where they go out to high schools, they teach kids how to bake, and then they give them enough ingredients to go home, make 2 loaves of bread, one that they keep for their family, one they bring back the next day, gets distributed to a local food bank to help folks in need. And so they're really being creative and innovative on how they're engaging local students, local families, local charities with their business, getting their brand out there, right? And really creating ripple effects that are touching thousands and thousands of folks through a simple act of teaching a bunch of high school students how to bake bread. Kind of moving back out into the community area, Tulia is actually an amazing company, and I love fair trade, folks, and everyone should buy fair trade certified company products. Tulia goes above and beyond. They are doing literacy programs for all of the employees of their tea farm workers. They do a cattle lending program to those employees, which is another way for them to create revenue for their families. They are providing living wages at origin and in their base in Colorado, and their entire garden is tree shaded. And so it's not just tea, it's not just the fair trade. They are really trying to figure out what can we do. What can we do? And maybe it's just teaching people math, right? This is one of the great stories that comes out of this is someone who worked for Tulia, figured out after the financial literacy program that she went through with them that she had been overcharged consistently at the local market because she didn't know how to multiply, right? Like it's really like simple things that have really lasting changes, and now she can negotiate, she can get better materials and food for her family because she worked at a tea plantation with Tea Julia that's really trying to figure out how to create impact in communities where they're working and where they're sourcing from. Sometimes this looks like a more traditional version. So we have CDFIs in banks throughout the certified B Corp community. And so they're making loans in underserved communities, and they're doing that in ways that are really reaching out to those folks. We have similar folks in the fashion industry, where they're working on their supply chain and choosing women-owned businesses, making sure that they know how to create the patterns that'll sell in Western markets. And then I kind of save the environment for last, because this can often be, like, okay, like, it's good companies, that's mostly going to be green, and I knew that Erin would kind of crush this one, so I don't have to tell you a ton about how, different ways that people can do this. But it's everything from cleaning products where Method actually pays their suppliers to reduce carbon emissions, to Patagonia, which has been using organic cotton since 1996, and which has been a leader in the textile industry on reducing the impact of their products. And last, because they're expanding to North Carolina very shortly, and you'll be hearing from Kim from New Belgium, making beer. They have amazing practices. It's 100% renewable energy, 99.9% of waste is diverted, methane capture, reducing everything. Like, they have thought through everything on reducing the environmental impact of their manufacturing facilities. So there's a bunch of examples right here in North Carolina. TS Designs, if you guys haven't heard of, they're in Raleigh-Durham. They make t-shirts. They have an amazing Cotton of the Carolinas program where they're actually making sure they buy from cotton farmers in North Carolina. They're processing them here, they're dyeing them here, they're selling them here. It's all within a 700-mile radius. So it's really committed to its local community. And then Bull City Brewery is similar to a Lost Province, where they're doing all local sourcing, all local ownership, all local folks, and they're a group hub serving up great burgers and beer. And so this is something that's, it's global and it's local, and it can look like those typical folks you think of when you think of social enterprise and sustainable business, right? We have solar, we have microfinance, we have bottom of the pyramid stuff, but it also looks like faith-led insurance companies and law firms and software as a service and manufacturing and banks, from a leading bank in Denmark to a local community bank in Virginia. So this is what we think business should look like, but right now it's what good business looks like. And I know I'm out of time, so I'm just going to take 1 minute and go through kind of, we are right now trying to figure out how we bring this movement to business education, right? And so what does good business education look like, right? And it involves faculty, it involves students, it involves administration, and a couple of things we're thinking through right now is curriculum. This is happening already across the country where folks are incorporating the assessment or these kinds of practices and attitudes into their curriculum. This is student projects, where student groups are working with local companies to go through the assessment, which is a really great project. It's interactive. You're learning real operations from a real company, and you're figuring out the challenges of impact measurement. There's some loan forgiveness and stipend programs at a couple of institutions. And there's now a fellows program for folks who are coming through here, where we're really leveraging talent to go help all companies measure what matters. So there's definitely opportunities for you and your students to get involved, and I'm just happy to talk through all that with you all, but we hope that you will join us in changing the system and supporting this movement.